It's Great Mondays Radio. Hey, everybody, welcome back. It is Josh Levine, and I'm so excited uh, today to have on an expert in emotional intelligence to talk a little bit about something we could all use a little bit more of, which is empathy. And we're going to get into the empathy deficit. Jevon Wooden is a leadership speaker and coach, author, podcast host. We connected because we both care pretty deeply about company culture. And I just really appreciated his perspective on this particular topic and something that, like I said, I think we all need a little bit more of. So, Jevon, thanks for coming on Great Mondays Radio.
Hey, thanks for having me, Josh. This is going to be an amazing convo. Love the energy. If I was having a bad Monday, all I got to do is listen to that intro.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. We try to bring you a little joy, even if you don't listen to the whole thing. Just listen to the intro. Um, so, Jevon, emotional intelligence. Let's give us give us a recap or a reminder. What is emotional intelligence, and what does it have to do with um the work that you do with leaders?
Yeah, I mean, emotional intelligence, it's really the ability for you to manage both your emotions and understand other people's emotions that are around you, right? And there's four quadrants. There's self-recognition, self-management. Of course, that's how you manage your emotions, how you allow others, external forces to impact your emotions, etc. Then there's the social aspect of it and the relational management. So it's how you perceive others, social cues, and different behavioral patterns and personality types, etc. So it really ties very well into the corporate space because we need all of that, right? You need to know how to motivate your teams. You need to know what makes them tick. You need to understand, how to best support them, how to best communicate with them, etc. And they need to understand the same for you. And also, you need to know what best works for you because if you can't convey that, how will they know?
Right. I mean, I feel like one of the big challenges that emerge inevitably in corporate spaces is how do you self-regulate? How do
Mhm.
you have the level of awareness so that you don't, so that if your internal life, of course, we want our internal life to be, work on and to be improved, but I'm miss meditating and gotten, was late to work or whatever. And I got all this inner turmoil. How do you, right? The self-regulation is how do you not let that affect other people, which is, I think, I don't know, something I struggle with a lot.
Yeah, it's something that I always say it's a practice. Like it's like mindfulness practice, yoga. You mentioned yoga is a practice. We don't always get it right, but the fact of the matter is, it is something that is a skill that can be learned. A lot of folks believe that emotional intelligence and empathy is something that is innate. You're born with it, but that's not necessarily the case. Of course,
Mm.
there are some people who skew to be more empathetic or more emotionally intelligent in some way, shape, or form. But it does not mean that you can't work at it to become better.
Well, how would I start getting better at having emotional intelligence? I know it's a long journey, but what do you have a tip? Something where it's like, where do I start? Where do I start looking?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I like to start small for people. One of the key things is a lot of folks who are not perceived as being emotionally intelligent is they feel like they have to always have the first say or the answer. When that you should really, really kind of change that. So just place a pause, right? Pause yourself. If you feel like
Mm,
your employee or one of your teammates say something, you like, I'm biting at just saying that is wrong, right? Pause and then see if you can, instead of having an answer, see if you can come with a question. Tell me more about that. Oh, well, what was your thought process behind that way? See if you can become curious versus becoming the answer. Right? And that's going to really start sparking some new and insightful and fun ways for you to become more emotionally intelligent.
all right. So step one, pause and ask a question as opposed
Yes.
to direct a comment, perhaps.
Yes.
Yes. Good reminder. Something that I know, but maybe I don't practice as much.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy as a leader. Let's just face it, like, because people are coming to you constantly for your insights, right? And in that role, in that position, you feel like you should be the person to be like, all right, let me do this. But that, you have a team for a reason. These people are in the roles that you have them in for a reason. And if they're your counterparts, you may not necessarily have hired them, but there has to be something that they seen when they did the interview process and everything for this person. So we have to understand that. And then there's another piece to the emotional intelligence component, right? Behavioral patterns. So we've all heard of DISC and Myers-Briggs and all these other things. It's not a personality assessment. I just want to say that it's your behavioral patterns. And we have to be mindful of that because that means we can change our behaviors. And a pattern means that once we recognize that power, now we have power to change it if we want. So we have to make sure that we pay attention to ourselves. Who particular makes us feel a little bit more angry or frustrated or, whatever that feeling may be, and why? Is it because they ask you more questions than you care to answer? Is it because they come with more details than you care to have? Right? That may be telling you something about who you are. And then once you learn that, now you can learn about who they are and start getting to know them on a different level. Right? Because a lot of times we're just like, this person sucks. They irritate me. Tired of them doing this.
Right.
But if we like really start to learn the behavioral patterns and what's happening in that place, then we have it's game on.
Well, maybe this is our way into empathy, which is we apply that uh, tactic that we just talked about, pause and ask a question, move it from outside to inside, right?
Mhm.
So you have something happens in the world. We don't have control over things that happen in the world, right? Something happens, someone in your manager or your colleague or whatever, something happens, right? They say something and you have a reaction. So maybe what I'm hearing you say is pause and ask a question of yourself around that. If you're feeling
Yes.
irritated, and this is something that I've been working on a lot in the past couple of years, which is, wait, why? Number one, I'm irritated, right? Just even acknowledging that. But then two, why am I irritated? What is going on? And I don't always know the answer, but at least I have some sense of control in that. And I think, I don't know, that seems like kind of a good starting point for this moment of empathy, even though we're kind of turning it inwards. Because what ultimately, well, I'll ask you to define empathy. What is empathy? And then we'll talk about why we're lacking it.
I mean, again, empathy it ties to that emotional intelligence piece, right? It's understanding the feelings. It's understanding not just you, but that other person, and understanding the interaction and intertwining
Mm,
that, right? That when you come together, what happens? Because that's another point. Some of us can be empathetic when we're with certain people, right? Certain people bring that out of us. Like
mhm.
when you're with your kid or your spouse or somebody, you might be able to be empathetic with them, but it's that person that for some shape or way or form, you're just like, I don't care what you're talking about, right? I feel like you're not really proficient at your role. It's something about that person. And a lot of times it's because our behavioral patterns clash. If you look at DISC, right, I may be a D, and then if I talk to that C, right, a D is dominant, they're assertive, they don't need all the details, they just want high level, right? Give
Mhm.
me the pertinent stuff, and I'm ready to go. That C, they want to ask you a million questions. They need the whole plan fleshed out. They need all the details every step of the way. And that's going to drive you insane if you're on opposite ends of the spectrum. So, right. So that can really play into what we call the empathy deficit, because we're two different people. But if we never bother to understand why that is and play into the strengths versus getting annoyed because they're not who we want them to be, right?
Mm.
We're like, I wish they were more like me. Do you really? Right? If we work with all the same people and all of us were the same, a lot of the innovations that take place wouldn't happen because we think the same, right? So we need to really play into their strengths and identify how we best would work together. And you can have those conversations with people like, hey, you know what? I'm going to be honest here. I get frustrated when you ask me these questions. I would love to understand more about that your behavior patterns or what that does for you. Right? When I give you this extra information, do you feel like I'm just not giving you enough? How can I best support you so we can be successful together? because if you really need to work with that person, you got to figure it out together. And that's one of the hardest things in an organization today, especially in the remote teams. So we have to really have those difficult conversations and get to know the person on enough of a personal level where it can really benefit our professional success.
So I looked up the definition of empathy. So this is from the Greater Good Science Center at Berkeley University of California, Berkeley. The ability to sense other people's emotions, coupled with the ability to imagine what someone else might be thinking or feeling. So you can identify an emotion. Oh, they are feeling anxious, they are feeling excited, they are feeling, energized. But also you have to internalize that, and it's the, being in someone else's shoes for a little bit. And I think the what I hear you saying is the ability to internalize someone else, to use our sort of big mammal brains to imagine what might be on the inside is enabling us to have a more um like a more connected experience, a more um productive conversation, because what you're trying to do, I think, I think I hear you saying, is understand the other person. They're not coming at you with these questions to annoy you. Like that's not the person. That's not the purpose of that. And so if we can feel what someone else is feeling, well, what is, I mean, that, so you're so beyond, hey, we need to work through our challenges together. I mean, empathy has, what does it unlock for us if we have more empathy at
Mhm.
work? What else, right? So, okay, I see you're having a bad day. I feel compassion for you. I'm more likely to work better with you. So that's kind of the starting. What else is it going to unlock? Why should I invest in this? Why is it a
Yeah.
problem that there's a deficit?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you know and your audience heard, but 77% of people are disengaged at work in some way, shape, or form. 77%, which globally accounts for $8.8 trillion in lost revenue, right, for organizations. The issue is when you talk about empathy, a lot of people think of empathy as like this fluff thing. They're like, oh, it's a soft skill, like, oh, it's all wishy-washy, but it's really the opposite. Empathy allows you to have those effective conversations where you can say, hey, I feel that, your performance has gone down a bit. Tell me, what's going on with you. So you're willing to have that conversation. You're willing to check in more often.
Mm.
You're willing to hear feedback as a leader or as just a person, right? You're not internalizing it. You're welcoming that, right? Because you're not getting in that defensive space. You're like, okay, this person is actually looking out for me. They're not coming at me in a way that they're attacking me. So that's where empathy comes into play. It allows us to have that dialogue that is necessary for us to really snap in. And then also, as a leader, it helps us provide the resources needed for that person to be effective. If I'm an empathetic leader, I understand that not my whole team is not the same. So one person, yes, they may be motivated by money. So if I pay them a little more, they might just do the work just because that's their job. The next person, they may have been the first person to, graduate from school. They're supporting their family. So maybe the money and the kudos is not what they're looking for. Maybe an extra day of vacation may be what motivates them, right? So understanding how that dynamic works for each member of my team, I can play into that as a leader and say, hey, man, you know what? If we can get this project done early, right? Yes, there's a bonus cash incentive, but how about we just give everyone a day off, right? So now I'm playing into my whole team. I know all of them, right? And we can afford to do that. The other piece to empathy is if you think about the team dynamic, there's a lot of, you can be micromanager, you can be an absentee manager, or you can be just right. If you lack empathy, typically you're going to be on the end of micromanagement or absentee management. You're not going to give enough or you're doing too much, right? As an empathetic leader, you'll be able to identify that. You'll be willing to ask your team, hey, how can I best support you as your leader, as your manager? should I be checking in with you, right? And you're going to tell them, I want to be, I want you to tell me this weekly. I want you to give me a report daily, whatever. You'll be able to communicate those things because you'll understand yourself and you'll understand them. So it's a lot of things that really tie into this, and it will allow you to alleviate a lot of that retention issue and a lot of disengagement that's going on today, because a lot of the disengagement is coming because people don't feel valued, seen, and heard. Empathy allows you to resolve all of them. And a lot of
Mm.
us are not playing into it.
That's a big piece of it. I think you're exactly right about not being seen. I wanted to get your take on something. I recently heard social psychologist Brene Brown, whom I'm sure you're a big fan of. I am as well.
Yes.
Her book Dare to Lead, I think, is on every executive's bookshelf.
Yes.
She was commenting that she had observed in her undergraduate course um, that the younger generations are unlikely to or more likely to avoid intimacy, or and I don't mean like love intimacy, but like deeper relationships, and want are avoidant of uncomfortable situations. And she noted, and she noticed in the explicit lack of um eye contact. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like something has occurred, and we don't have to kind of get into the driver of all that, although that is interesting. Does learning what do you think that by learning to be more empathetic, that would help? Is that, I mean, those are in the same realm. Are those connected? Like I think what she's talking about is this, like, I don't want to be in any like emotionally vulnerable situations, uncomfortable situations, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
seeing that as well. Is that is empathy the one of the doors into this challenge?
I say yes, because emotional is that's an interesting word, right? Because there's you can't really take emotion out of anything. Having
Mhm.
an emotion of indifferent is an emotion. So if I'm like I'm just indifferent about it, I feel something for it. But emotions go deeper than just feeling. It's also acts, right? The way we react. So if I'm in a corporate space and a Gen Zer tells me they want to avoid eye contact, they want to avoid this, that's an opportunity to say, okay, well, how do I have an effective conversation with you, right? What's the best way for us to have a conversation? Because I need things done as a leader. We are in a corporate space, right? How can I best get the most out of you? Right? And I think that that's an important thing that we often feel uncomfortable asking, but it's
Mhm.
something that is necessary to ask. And that's the key. That's why I say empathy is not soft. You have to be willing to have that difficult conversation. And I know Gen Z has a lot of these statistics that's out there. There right now there's a statistic, I forgot what the acronym is, but meaning they're not getting education, they're not working, they're not in any sort of training, they're just chilling at the house, right? Enjoying life. I think it's like NEETs or something like that. But
Mhm.
Gen Z is a very interesting case. But as we've seen in every different revolution when it comes to industrial and doing things differently, they say the same thing about all generations. Every generation was lazy
Lazy.
prior for the other generation, right? So we see this in history is repeating itself. But one thing that had to come in was like, okay, let's get their insights, right? How they're the ones that's going to be doing this work, years down the road. So how can we best start future proofing this organization or what we're doing or this idea so we can get the most out of the way they operate? Right.
Mm.
And that's where we need to come into play on this. A lot of this stuff, like the gamification of tasks, is that's where a lot of this is going, gamifying things, so it's not just straight work. I don't have to do just this straight thing, but making it a little more interesting. When you get perspectives from Gen Z, we really have to be mindful that they don't like to have these types of conversations. They're more text-based and stuff, so just making it more conducive to getting the most out of them sometimes is all we can do, because we don't control, like you said, we don't control them. Right? They are their own people, but we still need them. So we have to take that all into account. That's where that feedback is going to become very important as we move forward.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I keep hearing sort of the anecdotes that you're kind of surfacing, and just thinking how challenging it is for people to actually sit down and talk about the truth of the situation. That is, ain't nobody wants to do that. And I think especially it's, especially Gen Z perhaps.
Hmm.
But look, I know plenty of, you know, elder Gen Xers and young boomers who are executives at these organizations, and they don't want they don't want to do any confrontation either. And I just as you're kind of going through the discussion around what empathy is, what the power is, I feel like, now I'll just speak from my perspective. I would be able to be more willing to and have a better mindset to sit down with someone who is a worker, to talk with them, if I start from a place of what are they feeling, what might be occurring in their mind, and that way
Yes.
I'm at least more open, aware of what is happening. And it becomes less of a conflict, and like you said, more of a question that you're asking.
Question. Yeah, exactly. That's it. We have to understand that we're in a time we're not going to have all the answers, right? They operate, people operate different these days, and how things take place is different these days, right? We got remote work, we have hybrid teams, we have people all over the world, different cultural backgrounds, different experiences, etc. But that is an opportunity for us to win. But to leverage that, we have to do what you said: be curious, find out what their experiences are. How can we best use them? A title doesn't mean that they're best in that position, right? Just because they went to school for something. So if we find their strengths and we have those conversations with them, we may find that the key to our next big innovation or breakthrough is within them. But if we never ask them questions and give them agency to give their answers, then we're going to just be like, oh, this person is this hire may not have been the best hire, right? But that's because we didn't take the job as a leader. John Maxwell said it best: a leader is an influencer, right? They're the person that's there to help get the most out of that person, even if they didn't see it for themselves initially. So that is our role, our plight, is to make sure that we lead by example. Empathy starts with us, right? And if we start to let people know that it is a space where they can share their ideas, where they can say what's on their mind, as long as it's
Mm,
tactful, right?
mm.
And we are willing to ask questions because we understand that we don't know everything. But as a body, we don't want to get trapped in the group think. We don't want everyone to be like, let me point at the leader, let me point at the CEO and get there. We want everyone to share their ideas, right? And then we'll see from that pool of ideas, what's best. It may be something we never even thought was possible.
Wow. Well, I think that's a I think that's a great place to leave it. That is really, I mean, I just am walking away with a little more understanding about. I mean, of course, we come in. I feel like empathy is part of our conversation, at least amongst the kind of professional class. But you've brought a little more, put a little more flesh on the bones here for me, and help to articulate that. And I'm gonna take this as a reminder to pause, ask questions, and ask questions of myself. I think that's going to be my action item for this week. Let's say is to pause and
Let's do
ask
it.
more questions of myself. Jevon Wooden is an emotional intelligence expert, a leadership speaker, and coach. Where can people find you, Jevon?
Yeah, you can go to my website, jevonwooden.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Make sure
Heck
you shoot me
yeah.
a message and say you heard me on Great Mondays with Josh Levine.
That's right. All right. Jevon Wooden. Find him on LinkedIn. Jevon, thank you so much. I appreciate you bringing a little more smarts and a little more energy to our Monday. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on Great Mondays Radio.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, man. It was a pleasure.